Thank you so much for joining us this morning for Coffee with Collections. This virtual program is made possible through the generous support of donors like you. Because the South Dakota Art Museum receives operational funding from the South Dakota State University and the South Dakota Arts Council, your donations, memberships, and gifts fund fantastic exhibitions and programs like this. Thank you. My name is Abigail Ramsbottom. I'm the Curator of Education at the South Dakota Art Museum and the co-host of Coffee with Collections. With me is Taylor McKeown, Curator of Collections and Exhibitions. And if you're able, stick around until the end today because we're closing with a very fun discovery. Please feel free to add your comments or questions into the Zoom chat, and we'll get to those at the closing. So we hosted our first Curator's Cut program last year for the exhibition Pose Repose, which explored figurative works in the museum's collection. Now we're doing another Curator's Cut for the Prairie is My Garden, which is currently on display. Come check it out in person if you're able to. The intention of the Curator's Cut program is to share pieces from the collection which may have been good additions to the show, but for whatever reason, they did not make it into the final exhibition checklist. We will look at 5 pieces today that we reviewed and ultimately chose not to display this summer. As we look at the objects, we'll share a little bit of information on the pieces and also explain why they didn't make the cut. Taylor, could you tell us a little bit about the Prairie is My Garden exhibition?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. The title of Harvey Dunn's quintessential painting, The Prairie is My Garden, which is shown in this image at center, serves as a springboard for this exhibition, which is on display through September 15th, 2024. It considers the human connection to the land that we now know as South Dakota. The painting has forged a unique bond with its viewers, becoming deeply significant to many South Dakotans. We wanted to share an exhibition this summer that included this painting, other Dunn Prairie paintings, and works by other South Dakota-based artists that explore themes related to it. I'll briefly introduce the 3 themes connected to The Prairie is My Garden, which developed during the exhibition curation. Starting with the first section, which is composed of artworks by South Dakota-based artists that depict the landscape from the Eastern Plains to the Western Hills. It includes works by Oscar Howe, Dorothy Morgan, Tom Thorson, Carol Cook-Gooey, and many more. Next, the materiality section displays artworks which utilize resources from the land itself. So in the foreground, you're seeing pottery, which is made from soil from the land, clay from the land. Exploring the extent to which artists can shape these materials from their original context to both amplify and reimagine their meanings. Also in this image is the final section displayed on the back wall in the image. And this section is still life paintings of plants and flowers that would be found in South Dakota. Of course, the central figure in The Prairie is My Garden holds a large bouquet of wildflowers. And in this section, artists depict prairie roses, pansies, corn, and other plants that would be found here. Abby, do you want to get us started talking about today's first object?
Absolutely. So the first object we're going to be looking at is a ceramic box by Dick Eady. On the slide, you can see the 3 objects that are in the exhibition by artist Dick Eady. So we'll jump to the piece that didn't make it for this show. This box came into the museum's collection in 1988, donated by Alice Berry. Both Eady and Berry were art professors at South Dakota State University between the 1950s and 1980s. Alice Berry taught for 15 years, while Dick Eady taught for over 30 years. This box is an entitled work that's about 6.5 inches in length and done in the raku style. Raku is a form of Japanese pottery which first appeared in medieval Japanese ceramics during the 16th century, around 1550. It started to become really popular in the United States in the 1940s, and by the 1960s, it was a really common practice. So Japanese raku pottery was traditionally used for making tea bowls during a Japanese tea ceremony. Raku tea bowls were known as both blackware and redware. Redware was simply red earthenware clay with a clear glaze applied, while blackware was made from stoneware clay with a black glaze applied. So in this example, we have the black glaze. And the crucial difference between raku pottery and other firing methods is that the pots are removed from the hot kiln while still hot and left to cool quickly in the open air. Raku pottery is made in a special low temperature kiln, and the firing temperature is about 800 degrees Celsius for about 1400 degrees Fahrenheit, or upwards of 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, so still quite hot. But it becomes crazed, which is an effect on pottery, which has a web of tiny cracks over its surface, and that's from this quick heating and quick cooling process. So if you peer into Edie's box, you might see a little bit of that crazing, or perhaps you've seen it before, this web of tiny cracks in the glaze. And this does not affect the structural clay. It's more of a aesthetic appearance of the crazing. And while this piece is quite lovely, we were unsure if it fit into the materiality section of the Prairie is My Garden. We're uncertain if the clay is from the South Dakota earth. And furthermore, Dick Eadie's work is well represented in the exhibition already, as you saw in that slide. Taylor, did you have something to add regarding its fit in the show?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting organically. We were looking at different ceramics for inclusion in the show because they were made from clay from the South Dakota land. But we also thought that it was a nice nod to the still life section to only display ceramics that were in vase form. So we had looked at this box by Dick Eadie and really loved it, but it wasn't in the vase form. So it made the cut in that way.
Yeah. But we're happy to share it today.
Yeah.
All right, should we move on to the next piece?
Yes. So the next work you do see behind us displayed, but we won't look at it on the close-up camera just because of its size. So you're seeing a slide of it here. The Charles Greener collection at the South Dakota Art Museum includes 53 paintings and drawings by the artist, most of which depict the South Dakota landscape. Greener was born in Wisconsin in 1870, settled in northeastern South Dakota, in Falkton particularly in 1890, and operated a painting and photography studio from there for decades before his death in the 1930s. Greener's primary love was the South Dakota landscape, and particularly the expanses of prairie and sky in Falk County, which you see in this painting and really the majority of his work. During exhibition development, we often talk about the importance of equity of space within our shows. We're proud that the show as it is upstairs right now represents a really great gender balance. It's 50-50 female and male artists, and that the show includes a really strong number of works by Indigenous artists. Most artists in the Prairie is My Garden are represented within the space by one object, but since Greener was such an avid depictor of the South Dakota landscape, we thought it appropriate to allow him the inclusion of 6 works, which you can see in the exhibition. So we picked from over 50 works in the collection. It was hard to decide. We worked together on making those selections, and this was one of the ones that made the cut. And one thing you might notice from the image on the slide is that the painting has kind of a yellow tinge, which is how it appears in person too. And that's likely a discolored varnish. So this changes a viewer's interpretation of Greener's original intent of color, and was one of the reasons why we decided to cut the work from the show. You know, Abby, we worked on this together. Do you remember anything else that we took into consideration?
Yeah, so something else we think about when putting together thematic shows is, will this fit better in a future exhibition? Does it make sense for this one? So we've been having discussions about doing an animal and art exhibition next year. And because of this beautiful hunting dog, this might be a good fit for a future show.
Yeah. So stay tuned. You'll probably see it in the galleries at some.
Okay, so should we share the next work?
Yes, I'll do a little swap out here first.
All right, we're gonna be pulling up an Oscar Howe work next.
Yes, so South Dakota's first artist laureate, Oscar Howe, is one of our state's most celebrated artists. He was a Yanktonai Dakota artist and used his heritage to portray Native American traditions through a modernist aesthetic. Known as Missoula Hochshina, Howe rose from illness, poverty, and prejudice to international acclaim as an artist and teacher. Born in the Crow Creek Reservation in South Dakota, he attended the Pierre Indian Boarding School and later graduated from Santa Fe Indian School in 1938. The museum's Howe collection showcases his mature style, which you can see in this painting, developed in the 1950s when he shifted from the Santa Fe style to a more abstract personal approach. And his style featured bright colors, dynamic motion, and pristine lines, all things that are exhibited in Buffalo Hunt. Throughout his career, Howe received numerous accolades, including the Artist Laureate of South Dakota and the South Dakota Governor's Award for Creative Achievement. He taught many years at the University of South Dakota. And because of his deep significance to South Dakotans, we aim to exhibit his work as much as possible. We touched on this a little with Charles Greener's work, but one criteria which we must always consider when choosing objects for exhibition is their long-term preservation. We aim to preserve the objects within our collection so that they are available for research and exhibition for future generations. And some objects are made of materials which are inherently more likely to degrade. Oscar Howe utilized gouache or casein paint media, which is highly susceptible to light damage. The South Dakota Art Museum collection includes 27 paintings by Oscar Howe. And since we try to regularly include Howe in permanent collection exhibitions, we have to be very selective with what is shown and how often. When we were developing this show, we selected 3 potential Howe objects for inclusion, including this piece. That show Howe's abstracted version of flora and landscape. It was intended to be in the landscape section. And I determined because of conservation concerns, we should only include one Oscar Howe painting in the exhibition. So there's one upstairs, which I encourage you to come and see before September. This painting, which was considered, is titled Buffalo Hunt. It depicts the hunting of a bison by a rider on horseback. This object was of interest for the exhibition because of Howe's sparse, abstracted depiction of the landscape, reduced to 3 pieces of brush and traces of shadows or a path on the ground. Ultimately, though, the Howe painting that is currently on display will need to be kept in storage for up to 5 years before it can be exhibited again. And because we chose to cut Buffalo Hunt from the exhibition, it will be able to be included in upcoming shows. We also wanted to share a rarely seen aspect of Howe's work. This is kind of fun. This slide shows the back of this painting. And many of his works bear a signature, an inventory number, and an original price. Here you can see that this painting, I think it's number 253 in his personal inventory, and that he originally charged $200 for it. So something that we don't often get to see, or the public doesn't get to see. Abby, I rambled. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so to touch on what Taylor said, that these works on paper are really sensitive. We don't get to pull them out as often as we may like, but we do have Past Perfect online, which was launched this year. It is constantly being updated, and basically it has many of our objects online with images, maybe a little bit of information about those works. And so you can view these works, all of Howe's works that are in the museum's collection at sdartmuseum.pastperfectonline.com. And I'm hoping that Carolyn, yes, is dropping it in the chat for you right now if you'd like to take a look at it.
And something fun that I like to do when I visit museums is our Past Perfect online collection database you can use on your phone. So if you come and you view one of Oscar Howe's paintings on display at the South Dakota Art Museum, you can pull up all the other works in our collection on your phone and compare and contrast what else is in the collection and not on display.
Yeah.
So it's a great tool.
Yes. Okay, so are we
on
going
to our final objects?
All right, so we're gonna close with 2 ceramic objects today. They're gonna be pulled up in just a second, but I'll just mention that they were part of a donation in memory of Alice Berry in 1992. So the raku box that we looked at to start, that came to the collection in 1988. These pieces came 4 years later, after the passing of Alice Berry. So as I mentioned, Berry taught at SDSU for 15 years, starting in 1966. And her work is actually on display in the Prairie is My Garden exhibition. It's an experimental root assemblage, and we'd love for you to come and see it. So as we view these objects, I'll tell you a little bit about what we knew when we started the curatorial process. The pot with the flat lip, the larger piece, is 8 inches tall and about 8 inches in diameter. It's a ceramic work with a rosette stamp in the clay near the base, and the artist is unknown. The other vase is only about 3.5 inches tall and 4.25 inches in diameter. And it also has a seal imprint in clay near the base and has some lovely gray, brown, rust, and olive colored glazes. Because the artists were not known, we really don't know when the piece was made. We know that both of these pieces were made before 1992, the year that they came into the museum's collection. And when Taylor and I were discussing ceramic pieces for the exhibition, we talked about what we had space to show and what we wanted to prioritize. We came to an agreement that it would be important to showcase works by known artists as opposed to unknown artists. For example, in one of the earlier slides that showed the exhibition, you can see works by Ella Irving and Olive Cotier, who were ceramicists at Pine Ridge Pottery. And the importance of the artist and artistic intent is a long-standing conversation in art fields. At the museum, we really value sharing and celebrating artists because they can add so much context and richness to the artworks that we care for. At the same time, you can certainly have an enjoyable aesthetic experience with an object without knowledge of the maker. Ultimately, for this exhibition, we decided to showcase objects with known artists. I thought Coffee with Collections would be the perfect opportunity to share artworks without known artists, especially because when we don't show works by unknown makers, in some ways, we doubly silence them. So bringing them out today is such an important practice. When preparing to talk about these works, we pulled out the object documentation, which I would love to share on the document camera if possible. So we had a very little to go off of. And basically we received this gift 18 February 1992. Thanks so much, Abby. Abby is our director, producer extraordinaire. So we have the artist's names here, and you'll see that we had 2 ceramics pieces and they were unknown as part of the gift. So we had their height and just very, very little about them. And that's basically what I shared with you all in the beginning. That's pretty much all we had to go off of. So we looked toward the stamps in the clay. That's the maker's mark, the indicator that maybe we could find some information out there. And for the small vase, we could make out a few letters. And then for the larger vase, the one that you see on your left, that's a rosette stamp with 9 petals. We pulled out the magnifying glass, and then we were able to discern the whole of that second stamp, which says A. Headley. So we had a first initial and then a last name. And thanks to the power of the internet, we actually identified the artist during this process. Art Headley is a ceramicist with a studio in Twig, Minnesota, and we have reached out to his studio in hopes that he can confirm that this is his work and to get any pertinent or important information about the object for the museum's archives. So I'm so glad that we made this discovery because of Coffee with Collections, and we hope that we can similarly discover the identity of the rosette maker's mark on the larger pot with the flap lip, excuse me. So this was our final piece, friends. If there are questions or comments, we can discuss those now. We have a little bit of time left together.
Yeah. And if anybody wants to take on the task of identifying the rosette, that would be wonderful.
Yes.
We are really hoping to identify that other artist. It's very exciting.
It seems that the rosette stamp is a little more common, so it might be a little harder to track down, but yeah.
I don't know, you gotta love the internet.
We do, yeah. I think, Joseph Stewart was director here when these objects came in, and I know he was a great scholar and researcher, so we're just lucky we have the internet to go off of.
Yeah.
Or Antiques Roadshow.
Yeah. Exactly.
Let's see, here's a question from Jeannie. Can you see that?
Yeah. How are you aware of what to look for to find artists? Taylor, do you want to talk about that database? And
How are you? I'm not sure I'm understanding the question.
so, how do we go about looking for an unknown artist?
Oh, sure. Well, truly, this time it was the power of the internet, but we, use book resources. There's lots of context clues, I think, when an object comes to the collection. Abby and I were discussing when we first started looking at this Art Headley piece, I said, well, I know that Alice Berry was collecting regional ceramics. She was connected with a lot of regional ceramics. And I said, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a ceramicist from Minnesota or Wisconsin, where ceramics are so beautiful and widely produced. And it just ended up that Art Headley was a Minnesota ceramicist.
Yep.
So again, I'm very grateful for the internet.
Yep.
And
yeah, it was actually Etsy that helped us figure out what who the piece was done by. We were just searching A. Headley ceramics, A. Headley pottery, and we saw the exact same print on a teapot that's on sale on Etsy.
Well, and I was amazed to find this database, which I think was put together by private researchers, where you can input any letter that you can discern from a maker's mark, and it will bring up pictures of all ceramics with those maker's marks letters. So Art Headley wasn't on that database, but it's another great online tool for identifying ceramics anyway.
Yeah. And
we discussed with the unidentified piece, one clue in identifying that artist might also be this overturned lip, that perhaps that artist regularly did that. So if we were to find a ceramicist that used a rosette often as a maker's mark and that flipped lid, those could both be clues.
Yep. Thank you for your nice comment, Judith.
Thank you.
Happy to have you join us, and we hope to see you again.
And we will be taking this video and cleaning it up a little bit, but posting it to our YouTube channel, which if you're ever having insomnia issues or just want to hear fascinating programs like this, but also artist talks, when we have receptions and guild programs, those are all on the South Dakota Art Museum YouTube channel. And so just go to YouTube and you'll find us there. Go to our website, you'll find links to it. But we really appreciate having this available that people around the world can tap into.
Absolutely. And if you are local, tonight is the start of our Anderson Plaza performance series. So we have free concerts Tuesday evenings in June and July, starting at 6 p.m. Tonight we have Mission Essential Brass from the 147th Army Band, and we'd love to see you there. All right.
Great. Thank you all for spending your morning with us and allowing us the opportunity to bring things out of storage and, look into their backgrounds. It's been fun.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.